This episode is sponsored by Magic Mind and Wix Studio.
When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's right, everybody. We are back, and this is the HTML All the Things Podcast. This episode is titled, Are Developers Making Page Builders Too Powerful for Content Editors? So in this episode, we're going to be talking about really what is sometimes referred to as developer control, where a developer is no longer engaged for a certain task because there's now a tool, typically a page builder or something in a CMS, that allows the content editor, the design team, etc., to come in, basically a non-technical staff, a non-tech staff, come in and make a change, add things, modify them, without a developer having to be engaged at all. So we're going to be talking about that in depth here. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. Now, I do have a bit of this is some HTML All the Things lore to share. This actually did not begin its life as this episode at all. I was going to do a CSS episode. I think I mentioned that last week. Problem is I was going to do CSS. I always call it Mosaic, and it's not correct. It's CSS masonry. So there's a masonry CSS property, whether it's going to be in the display or part of grid or whatever. It's still in draft. It's still being all figured out. The point is I was going to do a video on that because I saw that Theo had done a video on that. I saw Kevin Powell do a video. I saw some articles. So I was like, man, this is great. I'll do this. And in my opinion, it just doesn't translate well to an audio show. So I did a bunch of research, wrote some notes and stuff like that, and was like, man, it'd be pretty nice to have a visual example, and we can't do that in an audio show. So I decided maybe I'll revisit it once it gets kind of ironed out. I think it's progressed. I think the draft, there's like a working draft now as of October 2024 that maybe solidified some of the things. So anyway, go check out Theo's video. I'll link that in the show notes. Go check out Kevin Powell's video as well to learn all about CSS masonry because it looks pretty dang cool. But this episode is obviously something totally different. I've already introduced it, but I'd like to introduce the inspiration behind it. So I've been using Webflow lately, and Webflow has a couple of new features, and it comes in the form of slots. So there are page slots, and there are also component slots. So page slots allow a developer to define editable areas within a static page, or within a static design on a page, right? And basically pre-approved components can be clicked and dragged into these slots, effectively allowing someone who is non-technical to use what I think is now called the build mode of the Webflow designer to go in and sort of add these areas and sort of build a page with these slots. So this is still the developer or the designer going in to the Webflow designer, the software, and basically, setting up some guardrails and saying, okay, the rest of this page is static, but you can come in and mess around with this area using these pre-approved components. So the safety net is there. And component slots are also relatively, basically the same thing. So components, if you don't know, in Webflow are reusable things. So something like your nav bar, which is going to be virtually the same across all the pages, would be a great example of something that somebody would make into a component. So you make a component, you give it a name like navbar, maybe main nav, something like that. And then you can use that across all the pages. And if I make a change, such as if I update the logo that's in the navbar, it'll update across all the different components. One thing that's changed with components is that there are properties. Now, properties allow you to change things slightly with the same structure. So for example, you may want the text on your navbar maybe there's like a text box, let's say in the top left, that tells you the current page you're on. You may want to, change that per each page, but you don't want to create a whole new component for it, right? Because everything else is the same. So you can make a property, tie that to that text area. And so somebody can type in some plain text there, and that gives the editor some freedom to make a slight change without having to have, 5 or 6 components per, for one per each of your 5 pages, let's say. So these component slots allow you to basically put slots inside of components, and allows you to basically, keep the structure the same, but add variation to a component. Whereas before you would be forced to, make a whole new component similar to what the props solved with text. And I think there's images and a few other things that props can do. So this is almost like an upgraded version, let's just say, of the props. I haven't touched them yet. I'm actually doing a piece and I'm about to learn how to use slots as they are relatively new. So if I got any of that wrong, please, let me know. But that's the research that I've done from the Webflow documentation. So building these components, building these page variations, at the end of the day, used to be the job of the developer, right? So this is not a Webflow episode. This is like a conceptual episode, because someone would have to call me, hey, Matt, I want to change this. Hey, Matt, I want to change that. Hey, Matt, I want this slightly different. And I would be in there managing components or not, managing static things or components or whatever it is. And that non-technical staff member would have to engage me in some way. Now, you might say, well, Matt, there's been page builders forever, right? So, way beyond Webflow, we got tons of page builders, and they're all, really popular, right? A bunch of them are very, very popular. Things like such as Elementor. And something like Elementor, you can have widgets, or the things that you drag and drop into the page builder. You can have a developer actually make you a widget, a customized widget, and then you can drag and drop that in. So you might have a customized CTA, call to action, that you may have specifically for your company that a developer makes for you, and then you just drag in, company name, CTA, you drag and drop that in. So with these page builders, some of them are, really verbose, like they allow you to go and build the whole page. Something like Elementor does this, where there's a lot of sort of, let's say, general tools where you can add columns, you can add flexbox things, you can add images and those type of things. And then you can also add these pre-made widgets as you see fit, maybe like a slider or things like this. So the thing that's happening here with these page builders, with these Webflow slots, is it's allowing the developer to not be engaged for each and every little thing. And what's weird about it is that developers effectively with these tools like this, page builders, slots, etc., developers are kind of making tools that almost, I don't want to say kicks them out of their job per se, like that sounds a little bit ridiculous, a bit too far. But what effectively we're doing is we're giving up control to content editors, to non-tech staff. And is this good? Is this bad? Well, some would say, hey, developers are going to have a bit more freedom. They're going to get engaged less. They're going to be able to focus on tasks that maybe are more complex, or maybe, they're going to make a better product on the things that they specifically need to do. However, as these tools get better and better and better, something like a Webflow is a perfect example, where Webflow is largely used by web developers and web designers to be able to accomplish building pages. But now we have like another layer, right? We have this layer with the slots, with now content editors. And the complexity of these tools that we're giving control of to is going up. These non-technical staff are able to do more and more and more. And with that, are you going to start confusing them? Are you going to have them think, oh, it'll be easy to do this, and actually mess something serious up because the complexity and the depth of these tools is increasing? Or, arguably worse, are you going to result in a less clean web page where you're kind of making everything super, super generic, and now there's a bunch of code on your page, a bunch of structure on your page that you actually don't necessarily need? Like if it was static or if it was more controlled, then the page would actually be smaller and be more simple. So if you give non-technical staff more power, is there sort of a chance of things going wrong, is kind of the question, right? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about, I'm a developer, I'm giving up this control. Is this good? Is this bad? Are page builders too powerful now? So we'll move on to the first section here, which is the new tools on the block. And I put new in quotes because these aren't necessarily new. Like Elementor isn't, 2 days old or anything like that. But these sort of newer fangled tools where back in the day, you needed a developer to really do a lot of your web development stuff. And as websites became, in higher demand from just sort of like the everyday person, we start building tools that allow things to be built. So like I remember way back in, I think it was even elementary school, we used a site called Pixo, which was supposed to be like a picture website to like build websites. And it was like a drag and drop editor. So even back then, there was still sort of like a rudimentary site builder. And that's why I'm putting quote unquote new or putting the new in quotes, because this comes in the form of a page builder, like I said, the drag and drops, custom sections in Webflow's case, the slots, and then also sometimes are customizable advanced CMS techniques. So things like I'm going to add a toggle switch, and the toggle switch will show and hide the nav bar. It'll show and hide the table of contents. It will show the pagination buttons, or it won't. So even though the person is just going in and clicking toggle switches, maybe using some drop-down lists, they're still changing the actual structure of the page. Not every blank, if we call them blanks, not every blank inside of the CMS form needs to be filled in. And so these are the kind of newfangled tools that allow the non-tech staff to kind of go in, drag, drop, fill things in, and make their own pages. And ultimately what this is doing is this is empowering teams to kind of really revolutionize their workflow, right? This allows them to go, okay, I don't need to constantly have a developer here. I'll have my developer maybe make my Elementor widgets. I'll have my developer come in and make these specific call to actions with fill in the blank sections and things like that. I'll have my developer do that. But then once that's the case, I can go crazy. What's great about this is that the world of non-tech staff can be really rapid. If it's something like marketing, something can come up really quick where, let's say you weren't planning on doing a Black Friday sale, but all your competitors all of a sudden do it. And you go, oh my God, we need to have a coupon code for 15% off. We need to do this now. Well, the dev might be working on the Christmas update, right? Christmas is coming around the corner. Black Friday is pretty close to Christmas. They don't have time to do this. But if they have the tools with like a modular call to action where they can go, okay, we got this. We got a coupon code builder. Great. We can go in with our modular call to action in whatever software it is you're using, and we can go ahead and do that. So this is something that can revolutionize or empower teams, non-technical staff. It can empower them to go ahead and do this. And the developer doesn't even know about this. They don't get pulled into the thread about, oh my God, we need, a Black Friday sale. They don't get any phone calls, nothing. So this is really cool. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think on this type of stuff? Like, is this going to, we're going to like get really into it. I want to be clear. Like, this isn't the end of the episode by any means. We're going to like talk about the risks of handing over control and stuff. But like, what do you think about this? Like, are red flags going off in your head already by giving up control? Or like, what's your thoughts on this, just sort of at this rudimentary level at this point?
So yeah, it's tough to articulate because I've had experiences on multiple different levels in different CMSs, different design tools we've given up control of throughout multiple different teams. And the common denominator with all this is every time at the end of the day, the marketing team or the content editing team is never fully satisfied. That's always the vibe I get with any tool you give them. The more customization you give them, the more they're going to be asking for because they realize, oh, I can do all this. Well, why can't I do this? The less customization you give them, the more in a box they will feel, and the more they want to break out of that box and they start like doing weird things in the editor. And there really is no like perfect median that I found. I was at one company, they were using something called Prismic, which is a headless CMS tool that allows you to build, like you have the developers build your blocks, you have the content editors build the content, and then kind of merge them together, and you're able to do really customizable landing pages, really customizable blog posts and stuff like that. But even with that, with the ultimate like infinite customization there, right? There was almost too much customization, and there was just constant complaining from the marketing team, from the like about even the choice of going down the Prismic route, right? Like any choice you make feels like it's going to be kind of shit on by the people using it, because not necessarily because of the tool, but because of the higher and higher expectations from those tools that people have. And the fact that no one tool does everything well. So what ends up happening is someone will complain about a tool, but they'll use the core features of that tool and they're fine with it. They'll go to another team, they're using a different tool, like they'll go from Prismic to Shopify, for instance. And that Shopify will have limitations outside that Prismic didn't have. And now it's like, okay, these limitations, but yeah, X and Y are better. Being like, you're always giving up control of something. There is no perfect develop like a page builder out there. And every time I go down this route, it's always to the detriment of my own sanity. So giving up, the more control I feel like you give up, like the more you give to a team, the more complicated these tools are, let's say, I feel like the more headache. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit throughout the episode, but like that's always been my vibe. So like I think simplicity rules. The simpler and more in a box a tool can be. Yes, people are constrained, quote unquote, but I'd rather have them constrained than unlimited power.
Well, they're kind of constrained in freedom because you as the developer would have to be called for everything. This tool, even though it's limited, is a way for them to say, okay, I don't need to keep calling you. I don't have to keep calling you, engaging you, opening up a work order, however the procedure works in your own company. You don't have you're giving them something that they didn't have before. I find it interesting though that you mentioned that, as you give, let's say like a marketing team more freedom, they go like, oh, like, why don't we just have this? And why can't I customize this? And why can't I customize that? And it starts getting to the point where it's like, yeah, you make a decent point sometimes, but sometimes you're making a decent point only for this one particular use case. And you're not thinking about, hey, this data set's going to get really dirty, right? There's going to be a lot of fields now. We're going to have to manage a lot of stuff. There's going to be a lot of like managing the actual, what would you say? The actual like, this field has to go here. Oh, we want to like migrate this to a different type of field. Okay, now we need to export this data, import this data as something else. Like they're not thinking about the technical backend. They're just thinking of, hey, in this moment, it would be cool to have a toggle that just does all this stuff. And you're like, well, hang on, hold it. That toggle is going to have to effectively toggle 8 other toggles, and it's going to be a mess, right? It's going to be a dang mess. So it's interesting. It's interesting that you talk about kind of giving up that freedom being almost a slippery slope.
Absolutely.
It's like this could be like a huge problem, like, and not good to be fair. One thing I do want to talk about though is not a slippery slope is my usage of MagicMind, of course. So one of the things that I've been doing recently is I've been, sort of drinking coffee, of course, drinking MagicMind, of course, but I've been cutting down on my caffeine by using MagicMind. And one of the things that I was talking about last week was, just the craziness of, this is my own personal problem, I guess, but I have a crazy golf schedule. I have a crazy Christmas schedule that's kind of starting. People are starting to do some Christmas stuff. And we have some crazy weather here in Southern Canada as well, where it's still super nice to the point where sometimes you almost need the air conditioner on. And it's sort of like, okay, I could golf, but it's also kind of getting to Christmas season. And so we're running around like crazy. And when you're running around like crazy, you kind of keep wanting to stop at places and, grab a quick coffee here, grab a quick energy drink here. And I don't have to do that, right? I have my MagicMind with me in my bag, in my car, wherever. It gives me that nice little boost of energy that's actually, made with some really great ingredients. It also allows you to basically, kind of get that gentle push of energy that you want, right? MagicMind is rigorously tested, and every single ingredient gets tested. Every single one that gets tossed into a production run is tested, and it allows MagicMind to say, okay, these are quality products. These are quality tested products that allow people like me to throw them in the car, throw them in the bag, whatever. Allows me to quickly just go in the bag and grab them. And their goal, of course, is to create the best beverage on the planet. And honestly, I mean, I haven't tested all the beverages, but this is a pretty good one. Like I said, I use it all the time. And if you're kind of like skeptical, like, man, I don't know about this. I don't know about this whole, like they want to make the best beverage. They're rigorously testing, each of the ingredients and all this. Well, they also have a great promise. They have a promise of a money back guarantee. They give 100% refunds, no questions asked. They don't even ask for the bottles back. So that is some confidence, some real confidence in their product. And so I've actually been doing something interesting. So instead of me just, throwing in the car, throwing in the bag, whatever, I'm going to try something different. So I'm doing a 6-day challenge. I'm using Magic Mind and kind of viewing Magic Mind as my secret weapon to power me through all this chaos. But I'm going to take a break from it. I'm going to see what happens. So 6-day challenge, 3 days on, 3 days off. I'm on day 3, where I've been drinking Magic Mind each and every day, make sure, because sometimes I do it every other day if it's a kind of a low action day, I guess you could say. So I've been drinking my daily coffee, 1 or 2 coffees, having my Magic Mind 3 days in a row. This is day 3, and I'm going to go 3 days off. So I've been feeling great right now. I've been doing, fantastic. I have that gentle push of energy, like I said, gentle push of energy without all the stress and the jitters and all the rest of it. The next 3 days, I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to jot it down. I'm going to be like, man, I'm going back to coffee maybe, or I have been, craving something like an energy drink maybe, or I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to go, again, 3 days on, 3 days off. If you want to join me and try this thing yourself, again, there's 100% money back guarantee if you don't like it. You don't even have to give the bottles back, but you get a nice discount with us. So that's magicmind.com/HTMLpod20. That's the link. Make sure to use the code also, HTMLpod20, up to 20% off. Again, magicmind.com/HTMLpod20 and the code HTMLpod20. No spaces, no nonsense, just HTMLpod20. Join me. I'm going to report back next time we have another, and I think it's going to be in 2 weeks, as of you listening to this. In 2 weeks, I'm going to report back on the second part of my Magic Mind challenge. Again, 3 days on, 3 days off. Why don't you try it? Get yourself some Magic Mind, order some, try 3 days on, be like, wow, this is really nice. Nice ingredients, nice quality, this tastes great. The bottles are convenient, they look nice, nice design. 3 days on, 3 days off. See if it helped you in those 3 days. See if it's a detriment to you not having it in those 3 days. Again, HTML pod20 is the code, magicmind.com/HTMLpod20. Devs, this one's for you. I've got 30 seconds to tell you about Wix Studio, the web platform for agencies and enterprises. So here are a few things you can do in 30 seconds or less on Studio. Integrate, extend, and write custom scripts in a VS Code-based IDE. Leverage zero setup dev, test, and production environments. Ship faster with an AI code assistant. And work with Wix headless APIs on any tech stack. Time's up, but the list keeps going. Step into Wix Studio and see for yourself. Link in the show description and in the show notes. So one of the things that I want to talk about now is actually the empowering of non-technical staff. We've already talked about this, but I want to talk specifically about the benefits to developers, right? So I have 3 different areas that I want to steer this conversation with, which is fewer support requests, speed and agility, and last but not least, reduced developer burden and focus on high impact work. So we'll zoom in on that first one, which is the fewer support requests. So this is the one where non-tech staff can make content updates, right? This is kind of the thing we've been talking about the whole time. They go in, they make their content updates, and developers spend less time on minor changes. However, as Mike said, is it always a minor change? Is this the slippery slope where you give them the tools for the minor change and all of a sudden it's like, I'd like to do this too. I'd like to be able to do that. I don't want to have to call you. I don't want to wait for this. I want to wait till the last minute for this. Or maybe it's not even their fault, right? They're not waiting till the last minute. Things are coming in last minute and they're urgent. And now they can't just go in the CMS and click a few things, edit some text. They got to call you. You got to make a meeting with them. There's a whole procedure involved. And so by giving non-tech staff the power to edit things, you will get fewer support requests. Or will you? So the thing here is that there is a UX involved. And like, Mike, I see you kind of like nodding your head to it. There's a UX involved here. And the UX is, and we've done this to ourselves, even though you're not customer facing, the CMS, the tools are not customer facing, you still better make them A, clear to use, and B, nice to use. Because Mike, you and I in the past have made websites where we're like, oh, it's just us using it. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And we just make a horrible UX for ourselves in the CMS. The CMS is just a horrible UX. Things aren't labeled nicely. Things, I'm uploading images to the wrong fields accidentally because I just labeled them image 1, image 2. And sure, you don't have to make it super nice for like customers, but you do need to make it so that you're not making mistakes and that you want to edit it. So in our case, Mike and I would actually just not end up editing that site ever because it was a pain. And then that site ended up failing because we weren't editing it. We weren't doing the updates. Now, if you've given these tools to the marketing team, they're not necessarily going to fall off like we did on our own project. They're not going to necessarily fall off. What might actually end up happening here is they may go in and just grab the wrong thing. Like if they see image 1, image 2, they're gonna be like, oh, this one must be the thumbnail. That one must be the open graph, whatever. They upload it, and they do this en masse. Maybe they do like 100 posts, do 100 changes. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, well, this is all broken. And now you're getting a phone call. So you have to work on the UX to ensure that the tools you're giving them do actually result in fewer support requests. Because I would say this is absolutely a benefit, fewer support requests. But if we touch on the complexity point that I mentioned earlier, it's hard to make complex changes possible in a CMS and then make it clear as to what's happening. Because as the complexities go up, the proprietary nature of your changes goes up. So I'll explain that because that's really confusing. What I mean by that is let's say you have a blog post. Really simple. You have a blog post, and the blog post has a title, a table of contents, and the body. That's easy. So your tools are going to allow them to type in a title. Maybe the table of contents is auto-generated, so they don't have any controls for that. And then they have the body, and they can type in the body, change it, modify it, edit it, and create it. That's perfect. But then, a marketing thing comes up where it's like, hey, we want to actually be able to have a call to action in the middle somewhere. So the developer goes, okay, what I'll do is I'll detect if there's 3 paragraphs or more. After the 3rd paragraph, I will then put a call to action. And I need to know what the call to actions are. This is where a tool might come in, a very proprietary tool, where a developer may come in and make, let's say, 5 or 6 different call to actions that somebody can easily, kind of drag and drop or insert into that spot specifically. But like, what is the editor going to say there? Is it going to say custom CTA, CTA 1, CTA 2? What are you going to write there? Now, this is a simple example of what I'm trying to say, but having a dynamic CTA like this is not something that's on every other site. Whereas your other fields are very simple. Text, right? Like title, blog post, which is a rich text field, maybe something to do with the table of contents, pretty standard. But having a dynamic CTA like this is something that is not standard. And there's going to be examples of this that are going to be way more proprietary to just your site. So now you have to think, okay, I worked with Designer 1. Designer 1 has been here for a while. They're the ones that requested this, and I built this for them. Designer 1 hires Designer 2 when the company grows. Designer 1 gives Designer 2 the ability to go into this CMS. The CMS reads title, table of contents, blog body, CTA 1. What's CTA 1? One CTA? The first one? Is there not a CTA in the nav bar? Often there is. What is this? So now that's going to result in you getting a support request being like, what's going on? And so as you get drilled down in not only the complexity, but the proprietary nature, your support request may actually go up. So what do you think about that, Mike? Like, what do you think about the importance of sort of like, I guess, the UX of the not necessarily the CTA, although you can use that example, but of the CMS, and ensuring that, hey, I am giving you these tools so you call me less. I don't want to make a situation in which you constantly call me about this one specific thing.
Yeah, it's super important. That's why all these proprietary CMSs, WordPress, Webflow, they focus a ton on UX, right? What Matt mentioned a little bit, we created our own CMS for our own website, which was just a form, really. So yeah, that's going to be shitty UX. We intentionally made it shitty just to do it quickly, and that did negatively impact our usage of it, and it would negatively impact anyone's usage of it. Recently at Cypher, where I'm working, we had an admin panel, and we created an admin panel internally for one of our internal editors, and it was a nightmare to use. Because what happened was we needed to add on and add on and add on to it until it became a UX nightmare. There was literally situations that could have caused significant harm to the company because of a poorly designed and poorly implemented admin UX panel. So the reason that these things are not designed well sometimes is mostly because it's an afterthought due to the fact that the front-facing, customer-facing thing is where everyone's focus is. And then for the one person that's going to be editing the site, no one really cares because they're like, well, you'll figure it out. But the reality is that yes, it's maybe not as important. That's fair, right? But it is extremely important to nail down at least the UX of it. It doesn't have to look great. It can still be a form in basic HTML, but you need to make sure that you have validation on that form. You need to make sure that it follows basic naming principles, like Matt was saying. Otherwise, you're going to have absolutely not fewer requests, but more requests, and you could have catastrophically bad data or catastrophically bad situations where someone uploads, let's say you don't have a limit on image uploads. Someone uploads a 10, 15 megabyte image, right? That it could be a problem for performance. That could affect your SEO score, and your SEO goes down. You could put a limit on that upload, put it to 2-3 megabytes, and now that's a constraint that the person has to deal with. Or you have an auto compression algorithm that runs. There's many ways to handle that. That's going to make the UX of dealing with it great, and the output also great for the user. And you limit the chances of something actually breaking in your site. There's all these little intricacies of a CMS that when you're first designing one, you forget or don't think about, that most of these larger CMSs have gone through. Now, the other complexity here is that there's a million edge cases to each one of these. And a lot of times you have to make a decision on which edge case you're going to be supporting and which not, because if you all of a sudden have to support every possible edge case of your CMS, that gets into the territory of a million different toggle switches and a million different modals and tooltips and etc. that make it more complex to use. In which case, yes, you can do everything's safe, but does that mean the support requests are going to go down? No, because people don't know how to use it. So it's just a very difficult problem to solve, making these super complex, super powerful page builders, and also making it so that people can use them easily, and you get developers being able to develop and content editors being able to edit content and not have that cross-section be too hard. It happens, and I think, personally, I think Matt and I have found that balance a lot of times. Matt's kind of an expert at setting up Webflow now to be that kind of good use case for non-technical editors, but we had to get there through many, many different failures. And absolutely, you're right. If you set it up incorrectly, the support is going to go up.
Yeah, and this is actually one of the reasons. We actually have an episode in the past. I'll try to find it and put it in the show notes. It's quite old, so I might not be able to find it. But one of the things that I do, or I kind of pride myself on, is I like to have a good CMS experience. Now, it's not perfect. I'm not saying I'm going to be better than everybody, but I do go into it with kind of an open mind of okay, I'm going to open up this form. I make the CMS, I fill it, make all the blanks and stuff like that. And then I go in and I go, is this confusing, right? And I do try to shave it down. And what I'm ultimately trying to do is I'm trying to prevent mistakes. I'm trying to make it so that there is no detriment. And Mike, you just mentioned that in your particular case, there could be actual consequences to the company, like a true detriment to the company, which is not great, right? Having somebody being able to just quickly go in and accidentally, break absolutely everything is with an editor, I'd like to point out, without the editor stopping them or without them maybe even realizing it. I don't know the full context of what you were doing, but like that's not great. And so what I try to do is I try to make it so that things are not going to be, broken. A great example is if we're adding a new toggle switch, so just, on or off, and a feature did not exist before, and I add a feature and we allow it to be toggled on, one of the things is there may be a default state. So some CMS will have a default state where it's like you've added a new field and these are old posts. So these are posts that were in the past that didn't originally have this field. And so even though the toggle switch is on or off, there's a default like, hey, no one's actually touched this before. No one's seen this before. No one's messed with this. So I'll make sure that the default state is actually off. Now, I know that's something really small, but that's one thing where it's like, hey, this prevents a mistake. Because if someone goes in and goes, hey, why isn't this on? All they're going to do is go to one of the old blog posts and be like, oh, the toggle's not on. They toggle it on. And that's like a zero error state, right? Where now that they've touched that button, the default state's gone forever and it's either going to be on or off. Just little things like that. And the whole point of this, like kind of fewer support requests than that, is to try to increase, like one of the benefits of all this is to increase the speed and agility of teams or of the whole company, even depending on how reliant the company is on the website. So non-tech staff can, quickly create, edit, move pages around, do things, do the Black Friday sale, like I said, without constantly, talking to the developer. And you do not want to have a really bad UX, like we've already mentioned, on the CMS side of things, because this actually ruins the speed and agility. You don't want the CMS to be so slow and so difficult to use and so, say, problematic that it's actually taking more time up. At the end of the day, you want the amount of productivity, let's say, the amount of productivity to increase. You do not want it to be like, okay, this editor is really, really hard to use. So instead of a developer going in and doing this really quick in 30 minutes and plus a 10-minute phone call, so 40 minutes total, it's actually taking the team, the non-tech team, 3 hours, taking them one whole day to edit this page because it's so confusing and it's so all over the place. Right? You do not want to have that be the experience for your non-tech staff. You don't want that to be the experience for the actual team or teams, the whole company itself. You want speed and agility, and so this is a way. Right? Having these tools is a way to increase speed and agility, but used incorrectly, having too many complexities, it'll actually hurt the speed and agility. Now, one final thing in this section here is I want to talk about the reduced developer burden and focus. So sometimes, let's just say a lot of modern companies have two major components. They'll have a marketing website and they'll have a web app. And the marketing website obviously markets all the features and things that the web app does. And the web app is the moneymaker. The web app costs $10 a month, let's say. So marketing app comes in, it's all SEO to the 9, it's this and that and all over the place, right? The web app is usually complex in some way. Maybe it's like really, really, hard to manage for some reason. Like let's say it's an image editor, like a Figma, right? Like a design tool. And it's difficult to not only develop initially, but also bug fix, change features, add features, those things. This is what would be called high impact work commonly, because this work is something we can sell. Like, oh, if Mike makes a new feature, that new feature goes on the marketing page, and that's going to attract this group of people, this demographic. That's going to have them come over because our competitor doesn't have that feature, or our competitor has that feature, but it's worse, right? This is high impact work. So it's kind of almost, it makes sense to relieve the burden of Mike dealing with the marketing site. And he now just deals with the high impact work. He works on that new feature. And now the marketing team can go in and add that feature to the site by themselves. Once the feature is complete, Mike's finished the feature, 2 days early because he hasn't been constantly called to help with Black Friday sales and things. And he's able to really focus on that high impact work. So that's something that's really beneficial about these tools, is that the developers can work on things that developers must work on. Things where it's like, the marketing team is never going to touch this. This is like a weird compression algorithm or whatever. And I need to deal with this, right? Or I need to deal with this security thing. I need to deal with this storage concern, this infrastructure concern. These are things that the marketing team never touches. They never deal with. They only care about what the customer sees when they purchase our web app. And so this high impact work needs focus, and having good tools for the non-tech staff can allow the developers to focus on that high impact work.
This is something that took me a little while to warm up to. I think the split where like the developers focus on the high impact stuff and the marketers can do the other pages themselves. But the more I kind of did it, the more I was forced to do it, should be the actual thing. Because at the one job that I was in, I really was pushing towards, hey, let's do the marketing pages custom because your requirements kind of push us towards custom. Like they wanted a very similar interface to our web app as the page. And I was like, well, it's going to be hard to maintain the two design systems and two different apps. Anyway, there were some reasons that I had, and I was a little bit skeptical about having this split between no code and code. But the more I've done it and the more I've embraced it, the better it's been because of exactly what Matt just said. It's literally allowed us to almost not speak to marketing. Like I have a meeting with marketing like once a month or something like that to talk about little things that we can, add between the sites. But overall, they're on their own. Like they're in their own little bubble. Usually you'll hire someone to help you with those sites. You'll most of the content editing is not done by a developer. It's great. And yeah, there's some trade-offs. Like it's not as seamless going from a marketing page to the web app page as it would be if it was exactly the same tech stack and exactly the same site. 100%. Users may or may not notice. That's kind of arguable because I don't know what users notice at this point these days. And you can make it pretty seamless anyway. There's some customization that you can't do on the no code stuff. Except, you know the trade-offs of page builders. Everyone knows the trade-offs of page builders. But the ability to have your developers focus on high impact work is by far outweighing the limitations of a no code or a page builder platform.
That's like a really good point, is like the users the actual customers, may notice like, hey, what the heck? Like there might be a bit of design inconsistency. And that's actually what we're going to talk about in a minute here, the risks of handing over control to the non-tech staff. And one of them is design consistency and brand integrity. Mostly talking about the design consistency at this point, but it's more so like, hey, why does this site load? It's very clearly like a WordPress blog, for example. That's a very common one. It's very clearly WordPress with Elementor or something. Why is that, right? Or why are you using just, a theme on, enter in web platform here? Why are you using just this theme, but then your web app matters? And it's sort of like the users may notice, but I don't think many will care per se. Many, like it depends, right? It really depends on how much you care about your brand integrity. So like Mike and I have been in situations where somebody is just like just so brand conscious that it's almost a meme. Like they're kind of a meme of themselves, where it's like, we need this to be exactly the same. This is like 1 pixel off. Like, what are we going to do? This is going to like destroy our company. And it's sort of like, dude, no, you going this crazy is what's destroying the company. Like you're taking my focus away from high impact work. You're adding to the developer burden. You're making the tools that the developers make for the non-tech staff have to be so rigid that the non-tech staff don't know what's going on, or they're scared to change things, right? So there are risks of handing over control 100%, right? But it's an interesting, thought of like, some people are going to be worried about that, right? Some people, they don't have to be as crazy as what I just said, but there are going to be people that are like, no, we're doing all the same tech stack because I want this to be like consistent, right? I don't want any nonsense. I want the same, sometimes the same, CSS style sheet. I want the same CSS style sheet across both. Maybe some have some concessions depending on if it's app or marketing, but the class content box must be exactly the same. The class heading, heading one or whatever, must be exactly the same. And so there are risks of handing over control, whether you're using, an all-in-one solution where quite literally the marketing team makes an account and just starts building pages with a page builder, or whether you're using sort of like a hybrid solution where there's a developer that's dedicated to the marketing team and helping them. But that is absolutely something that is an interesting something to bring up, Mike, because we've dealt with it. And I still, right now, we have a customer that is like super about brand to the point where it's like, dude, we've been trying to modify your logo. Like, in other words, the placement of the logo, not the logo itself. Been trying to move this logo for 4 months. What are we doing? Like, it's just getting to the point where it's like, this is a waste of time and it's starting to get silly, right? But like if we kind of like push that aside for the moment and we talk about, I have another three things I want to talk about with the risks. So we already talked about the benefits to, kind of building these tools and the benefits to developers for doing so. But what about the risks, right? So I already mentioned the one, design consistency and brand integrity. So if we remove that extreme case, with these tools, like these page builders, these slots, these whatever, you are adding a lot of cooks in the kitchen. Oftentimes there are a lot of marketers or a few marketers. Sometimes there's even third-party marketers where like this person is hired just to manage all the Google ads, things like that. And this person just does the landing pages. This person just does the pricing pages. And so what happens is you start getting a little bit of a problem with cohesion. The design cohesion can be very, very challenging as the company grows and there's more and more pages. Oh, we want to change the whole design system. It's like, well, we've just added 100 pages, so we're going to have one heck of a time having, one or two people put together new designs. We're going to have 8 people do it. And then we'll allow them to go into these tools and build them. There's going to be problems. There's going to be design differences. And you'll notice this with huge companies as well. Like somebody like Microsoft and Google and stuff, if something is cutting edge, like if it's Gemini, for example, or Copilot or something. I remember one of the very first Copilot pages I saw was completely different than any other Microsoft page I've seen because they're quickly doing it. Hey, let's go. Let's have a quick little Copilot page go up. And then we'll eventually feed this to our team and be like, no, change this, change these headings, change this set. No one's going into the Copilot page, which was totally functional and looked fine, and going, this is ridiculous. It looks different than these other marketing pages. I hate this. What I always say to people is, especially if they're giving me work in a rush, which is the previous episode you should listen to, or maybe 2 episodes back. But if they give me something in a rush, I go, I'm going to make this as quickly as possible. I'm going to try to be cohesive to your design. But what's going to end up happening is I'm going to take liberties, but I'm going to leave the page in a state where it doesn't look foolish. So you might not be perfectly happy with it, but a customer is not going to come in and go, why is like the 10% off coupon like half cut off by another div? And no one's going to, but like you, the owner, might be freaking out about how they're like the column gap is 20 pixels and not 5. Customers aren't going to notice that. You're going to notice that. So when you hand over control to multiple people, hand over control with these editing tools, this is a risk. Brand integrity and design consistency can take a hit, especially if there's multiple editors, especially if there's lots of pages and multiple designers. We've already touched on this, of course, because it just comes hand in hand, but I'll touch on it now. And the next one here is technical and structural issues. This is, of course, a big, big risk. This is, of course, what causes people to end up being like, I'm going to use this tool so I don't have to call the developer. Something broke, I'm going to call the developer. So like it's immediately like a boomerang kind of in a way. So, without the knowledge of how to keep pages performant, for example, people may upload absolutely massive images. Now, the thing is you might say, yeah, but the developer should have put limits on. The developer may have put a bit of a liberal limit on there. Maybe they say, okay, realistically, we want 100 kilobyte images for this page, but I'll allow 1 megabyte. Bit of a big thing, but, I don't want the design team to be consistently caught up by, oh my God, I got to compress again, compress. So I'll do 1 megabyte so that we're not, serving 50 megs a page. But then the person goes and has 1 megabyte images and they add 50 of them. So that's something where it's like, oh, this page is suffering. What do I do? Call the developer. So you're going to have, kind of technical and structural issues like that. Also, they may add a lot of stuff because they think it's cool. Of course, right? I do this too. I'll start with a new CMS or something, and I'm just like, let's go see what this does and that does and this and that and this. And then the page just gets too bloated. And it's because it's calculating all the pages and then it's trying to show it in a tab, but then I'm doing that 4 times because I'm showing the blog 3 times. It's like, it's just chaos. Now, that's just me playing, but they don't know that, right? The non-technical staff are unaware of this. So they may take, your 18 tools you built for them, hit the red line all 18, and now the page is redlined, or maybe even crashes, and it's like, yo, all our bandwidth is gone. All our bandwidth is gone. What's happened here, right? Why is this so chaotic? And it's like, well, it's chaotic because you're redlining all these tools. And so there are ways, of course, like I said, like image limits. Let's say you have an image field and you limit it to 500 KB or 100 kilobytes, something like that. There are ways to limit it, but it is that push and pull where you don't want to really limit the non-tech staff too much, because they'll call you about that too. So technical and structural issues are something that are going to come up. On top of this last one here, which is actually security considerations. A big one here is, honestly, if something has a security concern, you probably shouldn't be giving the non-technical staff full reign over it, at least not without approval. That's generally what you want to do. You don't want to be like, yeah, man, just make a field, make a user profile. You can add as many fields as you want. And then they add a, completely unencrypted field that's for their credit card number, and that can honestly happen. Like, they don't know, like, okay, sure, I'll just put a credit card number field in here. You don't want to do that. So this is something that you do need to watch out for. But I do want to mention a slight kind of caveat on the side is one of the things that is great about building a tool around something that's security conscious is you can make it security conscious. And so you can literally tell the non-technical staff, hey, this particular tool is collecting our customer data and payment information. This is extremely rigid, and this is why. So don't ask for like more control, more this, more that. No, I won't allow you to read what do you call it, the credit card number in like plain JavaScript and store it in a variable. No, I won't be doing that, right? You can take control. And so if you are smart in how you build the tool, you don't have to really worry about security. But again, because these tools are becoming more and more complex and more complexity, it can dabble and even kind of disaster some of your security considerations.
I think there's another one that's kind of a side risk, but I've seen happen in real life. And it's the growing potential of animosity between marketing and developer teams, where if you have a tool that the developers maintain that allows the marketing team to edit their site, for instance, like I said, the Prismic situation, right? That situation actually created a little bit of a hostile environment between the two teams, where the developers were, yes, they were supporting this tool and they were meant to be kind of hands-off for the most part, but because marketing was demanding certain features and certain things were broken, it became this back and forth of actually the developers started to do more on the tool than they were doing on the core feature set. And it created the developers were stressed, the marketing team was stressed, and then like there was friction between the two teams. So when you're deciding on choosing a platform from that learning experience, one of the kind of decision makers I have now is like, you either have to go super simple, where it's not these integration tools. Again, Prismic is an integration tool where you kind of integrate it into your code base. And there's other tools like that, like Builder.io is a little bit more advanced, and like Plasmic is a little bit more advanced, where it's like pretty much part of your code base. Those tools could create situations that cause friction. And I think that's kind of like a big part of the title of this episode is like, if you make the tool too powerful, like because it's so customizable, that has multiple instances of, yes, if you have a very cohesive team, a marketing team that's very much understanding of the developers and a developer team that's very much understanding of marketers, you could have a perfect situation where you have the perfectly customizable website with the perfectly, constrained set of limitations on the data that the content editors are using. And the developers are perfectly happy because they have the full customization to continue developing in their code base and support this kind of CMS-like behavior. But it's dangerous slope, because as soon as you have one person that's frustrated and you're the one that's controlling this system, it leads to animosity. So I just want to have that warning out there that, like, make sure when if you're the decision maker going down the path of finding a tool for your team to create these page builders or whatever, know your team, like know who you're going to be working with, know the marketers that are going to be on there, and know what they want and know how they're going to react to things that aren't there. And set expectations early as well. Is like, if you tell them that, hey, we're going to create this custom platform because you need X, Y, and Z, you're going to have to be patient with, something else. And as long as you set those expectations and you trust the marketers and you trust your development team to be able to maintain this thing, it could be perfect. But this is where the risk of a too powerful content creation tool can really come into play.
Well, you know what? That actually plays into this next thing here, because we've already kind of covered this topic, but I'll just like read it out. So in the notes, I've written a point here where importance of good UX in a CMS in CMS for non-tech editors. We've already covered this in depth in the other sections, so I won't cover this. But your comments made me immediately think of the UX of enterprise CMS that are in the market right now. Enterprise CMS, I understand there's different ones. Some of them are going to be better than others. It is usually a disaster, an actual unmitigated disaster. I logged in to one that was considered modern. I think the license fee was 60 grand a month. It was a total nightmare. This was years ago now. It was a total nightmare. No idea where anything was. The pages weren't actually pages. They were pages that were logged into other, like, modules weren't where they were. So all I needed to do was change a URL. I think I was adding a slash because they had put these pages in a new subdirectory, and I did not set this up. I was doing this as a favor, and holy crap, was it not clear. It's like, oh, I'll go to the page editor. Okay, I'm in the page editor. Oh, the page editor has all these modules, and I can't look at the modules from in here. Okay, but I also can't see the module names. Okay, I'll go to the module names, see if they're named correctly. They kind of are, but someone's duplicated a bunch. So this is called sales, and there's sales in brackets 1, sales in brackets 2, sales in brackets 3. It's like, well, which one are we using? Okay, I'll click on each one and I'll see which one is like unique in some way. Okay, none of them are unique in a way that I can see. Okay, so do I change the link in all these? Oh wait, this one doesn't have links. And like, this is the reality of creating something where you're like, this is a powerful CMS. It plugs into everything. It has endpoints for everything. It allows your users to do everything. And then what happens? The user looks at it, goes, oh God, calls me, and then I go in and I do the same, oh God, but it's my job to figure out how to go through it. So enterprise CMS is a prime example of going too far with these tools. It's a huge risk, and I get it. There's a reason why there's enterprise CMS, because if you get this thing running slick, that's great. Let me tell you, the amount of technical debt and the amount of work for maintenance and hooking everything up and making sure everything works consistently, it's a lot of work to get something like an enterprise CMS to work. So you do not want to outgrow your, I don't want to say expectations, you don't want to outgrow your abilities to maintain tools that are for convenience, because then you'll just make them inconvenient. It's a mess. Now, I have 2 or 3 more other sections here. I'm probably just going to touch on 2 of them because I went ham on these notes. I wrote like crazy, but that's good. Like, it allows me to, if my brain wanders, I can come back in and read what's going on. So I'll include the majority of these notes in htmlthethings.com. But I do want to just talk about sort of when should developers be in charge. Like, I feel like we've touched on the middle ground, which is another section I've written here. But like, when should developers be in charge? We haven't really touched on that too much. We touched on it a little bit with security, but not too crazy. So one thing we already talked about is high impact features, high impact areas of a website. And I think that is an area in which developers should remain largely in charge. Unless you build the tools around the security and whatever, like, there's always an exception to each rule. But a good rule of thumb is critical pages or critical site features should be handled by a developer. Things like a product or a checkout page in an e-commerce store, these are intricate pages that need to be done, right? They absolutely need to be done. And you don't want someone going in being like, I'm going to change the color of the add to checkout button or add to cart button, and the color is somehow tied into 1,800 other things for some reason, and it breaks it, right? Or like, oh, like it breaks because we have like a seasonal script running where, you know, I don't know, like Christmas time or something, it goes from our company color, which is purple, to red or something. And then someone goes in there and changes it to some other color like yellow or whatever. And the script relies on it being purple. And all of a sudden everything, like, all hell breaks loose. You have a lot of stuff like that, and this is a really critical button. Don't build tools that allow the non-tech staff to change that. If it's critical, if it's complex, have the developers be in charge of that page 100%. It just makes sense, you know, even because the thing is we have like design tools, and even if the designers want to change something, they can go in, make a Figma or make a whatever other tool they use, Photoshop. They can make their own version and say, hey, I'd like the cart page to be updated to this. Fantastic. Now the developer can go in and be like, well, I know that cart button's messed up, so I'm just going to watch out when I do that and then go through. Instead of the non-tech staff coming in and just like, you're just running through it like a rhino. And then it's like, well, we can't add anything to cart. We're not selling anything. And we don't know what happened. That's a serious, serious problem. Also, when it comes to things that just, I mean, honestly, at this point, they just kind of sound technical. Things like site architecture and site performance. These are things that it depends on your strategy, especially with site architecture. So things like performance, that's really technical, right? You're going to have to know like the sizes of images, what's loading on the page. Are things lazy loading? Are scripts async? Are they deferred? The list goes on and on. Those are things that a lot of non-tech staff are not going to get. The thing with site architecture, though, is it gets a little bit messy. Sometimes the site architecture is really technical in that it may tie in with, like, let's say subdomains or, other link structure with the marketing site versus the web app. Like if it's the same link, if it's the same domain, that can get a little bit messy. But site architecture often refers to in the simplest form, the architecture of a blog of like, okay, I got my home page and then I got like another page that's like lists all the blog posts. And then I have another page that lists, or that's a template for all the blog posts, right? All the individual blog posts, like that type of site architecture. And that simplicity, like that simple site architecture, the page architecture, if you will, that stuff's really been handed over at this point. Like a lot of these page builders, like WordPress and so many others, they kind of just do it for you now because that simple site architecture, is simple, right? It's become mundane. Like we've done it so many times, it's not difficult. And the only thing it affects, which is still critical, but the only thing it affects is like SEO. It doesn't actually completely break the site. So basically, I guess at the end of the day here, when should developers be in charge? When something's critical, when something's complex, or when something sounds technical, or literally is technical. If it's something easy, like should we do /blog or /blogs? That's kind of up to you. It's kind of up to you. You might need some help with a redirect if you want to like have both point to one. You can call a dev with that. But if it sounds like, whoa, this is going to be a big job and it's not a big job because of data entry, you might want to call a dev. And if the dev's there, you might not want to have them make a tool for it.
It's a very good point. Like I was trying to think of like what else, but I think that covers everything where like, if it's just too complex, like for instance, what if you want a super, like a crazy amount of animations on a page, even if it's a static site, let's say, right? That could require a developer, right? Because it's complex. Like those animations could be too complex to just put embedded scripts in there and to get like a non-technical person to be able to edit and all that. So depending on just the regular website that you want, it could require a developer. If it's a web app, you're going to always lean on developers right now, at least. We don't have a good no-code tool that creates web apps. That could change in the future. There was a section here that we were going to cover later, but I think we're going to leave it in the show notes. But AI-driven content creation and editing, it's a good thing to bring up because I think that's where it's going, where a human, I was going to say a human, as if the developer was not human. No, like a content editor would be able to just speak in regular English to this content, like a page builder, and it would create the blocks or the components required for whatever, request they have. That's something that's going to come up. Like that's something that's going to happen probably within the next 5 years. It already exists. I want to make this clear. Like there is already systems that can do that. I just don't think they're good enough to be used in like a production application quite yet. They're like proof of concepts from a content editor's perspective. They're cool for devs, not really useful for that. But we're at this point where like, if it's too complex, a developer has to do it, but we might be pushing the boundary soon.
It like those tools are kind of Gen 1 at best.
Yeah.
Right now. And Gen 1-ish, maybe Gen 1 beta kind of thing. We can quickly just touch on these. So like I have this big section here that I'm not going to like bore you for another hour. We could go on and drone on for another hour. But like we mentioned how some site architecture, meaning like the structure of the pages and where they are, they can largely, especially on like sort of simple sites like blogs and stuff, they can largely that can largely fall to non-tech staff, and there's tools for them to be able to do that. But the future of page editing and who owns what in development, it keeps getting more complex, right? Like I said, that architecture thing I just discussed became mundane. Why? Because we made blogs over and over and over and over again, and blogs are, we know how to do them now. You can Google it, you can figure it out, and you can just do it. There's redirects for a reason and things like that, and that's it. Like, people know generally what's going on. That type of technology has become mundane. So what else might come mundane? Well, one of the things that's really hard is trying to make an SEO competitive, especially if the keyword is competitive, an SEO competitive article, writing that content. AI content creation may completely revolutionize this, and it is in fact already making an impact on stuff. There are AI videos left, right, and center on YouTube right now, where before it was like, hey, make a faceless YouTube channel and talk about something in a specific niche. Now it's like, hey, like get some stock imagery or even some AI images and have an AI voiceover do it, right? So AI content creation and editing is something that, maybe required a senior marketer before, someone who was really familiar with SEO, who knew how to get in and to fight for difficult to get into but valuable keywords. Maybe AI can do that now, right? And in the future, that might be what happens. There's also, we mentioned this like very little bit in one of the previous episodes recently, but things like VR are a thing. Well, what if we get to a point, and this is like a what if, of course, right? I want to be clear on that. What if we get to a point where someone puts on a freaking headset, a VR headset, and literally builds by clicking and pointing and doing stuff, but also talking? Like, we have smart glasses now that can talk to things like Meta AI and things. What if you put on, one of the, what do you call them, like a Meta Quest, and you talk to Meta AI and you're like, I want to change that slider. I want that slider to look like this. Do you think, Meta, do you think that is going to be good for SEO? Hey, are we missing anything for SEO? And it might look and go, hey, we don't have an H1. Hey, we got, too many H1s if that's your strategy, and you only want one. Like, whatever the case is, that it can help you potentially. And you might be quite literally grabbing and dragging things in VR. Is this potentially going to happen? Who knows, right? This is a what if. But these collaboration tools, these, tools that we have are getting better and better and better. They're getting more complex, and the complexities are becoming mundane as people familiarize themselves with computers, as people familiarize themselves with systems. Setting up like a basic CMS years ago was a big pain. Now it's like, go to, a WordPress host, or go to, whatever host for your specific use case. Like, you don't have to set up IIS anymore. You're not setting up Linux. You're not setting up this. There's hosts that do it for you. Oh, now you're not setting up your own page builder. Like, this thing will do it for you. Oh, you just want to use Elementor and that's all you ever use? Well, Elementor has a host attached to it. Now you can use that. Oh, Elementor also has some AI-driven content. Like, you see how this stuff is starting to, rapidly go quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. And so these tools are evolving. And so we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, I'm very excited and scared about this future because I think a lot of it will depend on, a lot of it will take a lot of developer jobs, but I think as the kind of like the main point of that positive of these tools, the better they get, the more developers can focus on more complex things. And I tend to lean on the side of optimism, where like the less we have to do these like meticulous little adjustments to a website that are very mundane but do require a developer, the more we can focus on the more complex problems and create better systems and create better like CMSs, better features of the website that maybe an AI or these no-code builders can't do. So I lean towards optimism, but I'm also cautious in the sense that if they get too good, I'll probably be out of a job.
Yeah, there's like the infinite like loop of content, or I don't even know if I want to call it content, but it's like posting on X, where everyone's like SEO is dead, and then someone else will be like, that's stupid, SEO isn't dead, and then someone else come in and be like, development is dead because of AI, and then someone else says like, well, there's still developers, and like, we don't know what's going to happen, right? Like, as AI gets better and better, if AI is capable of doing your job, there is a chance that you will be displaced by AI. There is a chance, 100%. But who knows if it's going to be good? Who knows if there's going to be regulations around it, right? Like, the future is such a question mark, because we also control, like, we as humans also control it. If Canada comes out and says, if you replace an AI or a human with an AI, you owe us $1 million a year per time you do that, Small companies are going to be like, well, I guess we're hiring people again. And that's going to be the reality. If there's a loophole around that, then some companies are going to use the loophole. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. Like, not only do we have a technological future that is unknown, right? You can look at trends and things like that. But there's 5 years ago, I would never be like, yeah, man, I'm just going to talk to my AI like as if it's natural voice. Like, what do you mean? Now it's like I turn on the advanced voice mode of Copilot and I'm like, it's kind of scary. Like, it's a little bit scary that it's doing like ahas and and like things like that. And be like, okay, so this is what it's like, oh, I mean, it's an AI and I can tell, but if I was tired, maybe I would miss it. Maybe I would think it's a real person. Like, seriously though, right? Like, it's getting to that point. Things are crazy. Everyone thought Google was going to be on the top of the world with this stuff. They are not on top of the world with this stuff. The future is unknown. Who knows? But I mean, I'm excited for it. I'm interested in it, and developers may end up developing themselves out of a job. Who knows? But anyway, I mean, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, remember, we are on Patreon. That is patreon.com/HTML, all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Tim from the Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. And Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com. Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server. And Stacy Mosteller, her website, is swoonworthydesigns.com. We'd also like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on HTMLallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught, the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or a review on the platform that you are listening to this on, and this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media. On Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.